Hello, my beautiful YouTube friends. It's Letty with Living Life with Letty again. And if you're new to my channel, I hope that you will stay. In this video, I am going to first give you a quick update on what's happening with my van. And then I'm also going to, I've had a couple of requests from some of the subscribers that they would like to know a little bit more about my life, or when I was a kid, where was I born, where did I grow up? And so that's what this video is going to be about. I want to tell you a little bit about myself so that you will know who I am and where I came from. So I hope that you will stay with me, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so and hit the bell so you'll know when my next video is coming up. So the first thing real quick about my van is that tomorrow I'm going to go see Jacob. And I am so excited, you guys, that I get to go see Jacob, because he's going to finish the table and hopefully maybe be able to put the insulation too. So I'll get those two things out of the way, and I am just so excited. I'm sitting here in my van. I'm parked in front of my house. I'm sitting in my van because this is where I like to be. This is where I enjoy being, in my van. I feel at peace here. I feel like this is my little private space, and I just feel safe. I feel secure. I don't know how to explain it, but that's exactly how I feel. I'm going to turn the engine on because it is getting really hot and muggy in here, and that way I can have a little bit of air. Anyway, so that's the update on my van, and hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to have more news for you. I'm going to do a video when Jacob works on it. So the other thing that I wanted to tell you is that people wanted to know about me and my life, and I'm an open book. I have nothing to hide. I was born in 1951 in Havana, Cuba. My parents migrated to this country in 1959, my dad, and in 1960, myself with my other brother and I. I only lived in Cuba for 1 year under the new government, and it was, there was a lot of turmoil. I was very young, so I can only tell you the little bits that I remember and the little bits that my parents told me about what happened at that time. I have to be very careful with the words that I choose as I describe my life there, because I guess I have been told that YouTube will demonetize or will even take the video down if you use certain words. So I have to be very careful of the words that I use. But if they demonetize me, that's okay. I'm okay with that, because I'm going to tell the truth. My life in Cuba, as I remember it when I was a child, 5, 6, 7 years old, I remember it was great. My grandmother had a sugarcane plantation, it was land that had been in the family for many, many generations, and that was our livelihood. We lived in the sugarcane plantation, and we lived very close to the sugarcane refinery, and I remember the sweet smell of the sugarcane. And it was just a smell that just permeated your senses, and it was a wonderful smell. And I remember that. I also remember that we boondocked is how we lived, because in the area that we were living back in the 60s, the electricity had not come out there yet. So we had no electricity. We used the big Coleman, the big Coleman lanterns. That's what we used for light. We did have running water, and we did have a toilet, but that's all we had as far as luxury. We had no luxuries because we didn't have electricity or gas running to our property. So everything was done with propane, I guess, or whatever they used in those days to light up and to cook and that kind of thing. I remember my grandmother and I would sit by the radio and listen to soap operas while she churned butter. She actually, when the cow was milked, she would wait until the cream would rise, and then she would skim the cream, and she would take a bowl and a fork, and I would sit there with her listening to soap operas, and she would beat that cream until it became butter. And those are really good, fun memories that I have. But like everything, in life, sometimes good things always come to an end. And in 1959, when the government changed, things completely, our life fell apart. our life just fell apart because the land was seized by the government. Bank accounts were frozen. Any assets that anyone had were taken away because the government wanted to make it a national government, whatever that means. National government meant that they would take your stuff and now the government owns it and you own nothing. So, you know, that's what happened. And I was, like I said, I was only 8 years old. I do remember when we were leaving at the airport. Well, let me backtrack just a little bit. My dad left first because in the middle of 1959, they had announced that boys between the ages of 16 and 24 were going to be shipped to Russia for military training. And I had a 16-year-old brother, a 16-year-old cousin, and a 15-year-old cousin. So my dad took them out of the island right away to New York, where he had an uncle who gave him refuge while we figured out what we were going to do with our lives. My mother and my younger brother and my grandmother, we stayed behind, and then we went to Havana because we were living in a sugarcane plantation in the middle of the island. So then we moved to Havana to get our passports in order so we could leave and join my dad in New York. That was a terrible ordeal because they wouldn't let us out. They wouldn't let the minors out without the father's signature. And my dad could not come back because if my dad would have come back, they might have arrested him or worse. We don't know. So we didn't want to take that chance. My mom was not going to let him take that chance. So my mom, being a very strong-willed woman that she was, kept going to the embassy every day. And I don't know how she managed, but they finally gave permission for her to take us out of the country. And it took like 3 months for this ordeal. And I remember the day that we left, we went to the airport, and when we went through a line, they took my mom had a chain and she had her wedding rings, and they took them because they didn't want you to leave with any possessions at all. I had a little tiny pair of earrings, like little gold dots, and they were going to take them. And then my mom asked the lady, you know, they're not worth anything, why are you going to take them? And then they ended up letting me keep them. And so we ended up, we got on the plane and we got to New York and met my dad and my brother and my cousins, and then we were all reunited. And we lived in Manhattan for a few months until my dad got a job. My dad had to get a job as a dishwasher during the day and making some pastries at night. And my mom went to work in a factory sewing so that they could feed all of us because they had 5 mouths to feed. And 3 of the mouths were teenage boys, which, you know, they're hungry and they want to eat. So that's my story up until you know, I moved to New York, and then from Manhattan, then we moved to Brooklyn, and that's where we lived for 5 years in Brooklyn. And that's another story because, you know, these stories can get very long because that's what happens when you're trying to tell the story of your childhood. But all in all, even though we had all this turmoil and we got kicked out of our own home and our own property, and we had to go to another country where we didn't speak the language and where everything was different, all in all, I had a very good childhood. I can't complain. I had a lot of love in my family. I had parents that were very good and kind to me. And it was hard. I don't even know how they did it. I try to put myself in their situation now, and I praise them for the strength that they had to be able to go through this ordeal and do it and come out okay, because, you know, we all came out okay. So that's a story of my life. In another video, I will post then the 5 years that we lived in Brooklyn and how I managed that. And then from Brooklyn, we moved to Los Angeles, where I lived the rest of my life until I became an adult and moved to Texas. So I hope that you have enjoyed my little story. And I hope that if you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave a comment, ask questions, or leave a comment as far as, you know, everything that I went through in my childhood. I would really appreciate it. So until then, my friends, Thank you so much for coming. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like and hit the bell. And I hope that the sun will shine on you today and every day, especially on your solar panels. Bye-bye. I love you.